Welcome to the Rural Blueprint, a podcast celebrating the innovative spirit of rural entrepreneurs who are transforming their communities. I'm Brad from Reinventing Rural, and each episode we spotlight small business owners and community partners who have built thriving enterprises in rural America. Join us as we explore their journeys and strategies, providing inspiration and practical insights for anyone passionate about rural development and entrepreneurship. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rural Blueprint. Today, we have a good friend of mine, Liora Sponko, joining us, and she's going to be telling us a little bit about her work in several areas. And we're going to specifically focus in on how some of that is impacting rural. Liora, welcome.
Hi, Brad. Thank you for having me.
This is awesome. This is great to have you here. So I'm just going to jump in and ask you to talk a little bit about yourself, okay? And tell us maybe a little bit about your background, and then maybe some of the work with the Oregon Arts Commission and the Cultural Trust, and then we'll jump into your own business, because as most people now, we all have multiple gigs going on, and I think people will be very interested in all of the different things that you do. So tell me a little bit about your background and your journey that got you to where you're at now.
Thanks, Brad. I think like a lot of us are multifaceted and multi-passionate about multiple things, which I am. And I grew up really wanting to make a difference. That was my core belief, just wanting to be of service. I think that's because I was a middle child probably, and just always wanting to help, be a mediator, help improve communities. So I've worked in the nonprofit community my entire career since, from when I was 18 all the way to 5 years ago. And I've worked in nonprofits and in different communities. I've lived abroad. I lived in Costa Rica working in nonprofit communities. I've worked in after school programs, youth education, environment, working in domestic violence. And then I landed in the arts. And and previously I actually had worked with Latino immigrants at a human service organization. And I said, gosh, if I move to this arts nonprofit, will I be able to make an impact as I am now working with Latino immigrants that are looking for jobs and homes and really essential needs? And I realized, like, yes, arts make a huge difference in our lives. And I was reflecting on my own life on how I grew up dancing and doing musical theater. I used to be really shy and never would do something like this until I started performing on stage and really opening up my own self-expression. I realized how much the arts has helped me grow as a person and build confidence and how impactful it is. I mean, there's so many stories we hear about how arts changes lives. So I ended up becoming an executive director of an arts organization in Eugene. And I did that for 9 years. And I loved working with the community. Got my current job at the state of Oregon, where I work at the Oregon Arts Commission and Oregon Cultural Trust. I am currently the senior program manager. So we get to support arts and culture throughout the entire state of Oregon, which is incredible. And so we give out grants, we support artists. I do workshops to transform communities and support communities in building arts and culture as part of their identity. And so I'm really passionate about that work. So I get to travel around the state and I go to a lot of rural communities and I get to know their needs and what they're working on. And we have a pretty incredible state in terms of arts and culture. And so that's my work in terms of transforming communities. And then I also love to help transform individuals. And that's what I do through my coaching business. So I have my own coaching business where I work with artists and entrepreneurs, people that are trying to make a difference in their community. So whether they're building a business, wanting to really build their art practice, their own creative work, or sometimes some my clients are just working on their own selves and how they are in relationship. So we really do a lot of mindset and energy work to really uncover any fears or blocks that they're dealing with so that they're empowered to take on their goals and to really show up in life with more like clarity, purpose, and power.
I think what's always been exciting for me is how you've been able to bridge this for our rural communities. We have a lot of people that are artisans, makers, creators, and these things start out as kind of hobbies, and then they're maybe a side gig, and they're selling at like an artisan fair, a farmer's market, and then one day they're kind of looking at it and saying, what can I do with this? Is there a business here? Could I do this part time to supplement my income, or could I potentially even take that to the next level and do it full time? And how it ties in with your work of supporting the arts throughout the state of Oregon, as well as this ability of empowerment and overcoming things like, you and I talk a lot about imposter syndrome. And then it also ties into the economic realities of these artisans and makers and creators who don't charge necessarily enough for their products and services because they're in small rural communities where part of their market are the local market that's like, I can't believe you're charging that much for me. Yet, if you were to move some of those products into urban centers, they would be, woefully underpriced. People would say, what's wrong with this? So I want to talk a little bit about your Arts Commission and Cultural Trust work. And specifically, what I'd love to talk about is the work you've done in rural Oregon and some of those small communities and the impact that that's had.
Yeah, thank you. It's my favorite part of my job is to travel to rural communities and learn what's happening. Like I said, we have an incredibly robust arts and culture community. Actually, there's been federal studies that have compared states, and Oregon has ranked in the top 10 of most vibrant arts state compared to other states in the country. And that's because of the number of artists we have and the number of arts businesses and the number of arts and culture nonprofits. So it's really robust, and we're so lucky to live in the state which such like rich history and so many stories that artists and culture bearers are sharing, and so many passionate arts and culture leaders that are doing the work, and whether it's, on the coast and the various art centers and the work that's happening versus like all the way to, Joseph is really known as a robust arts community with their foundry, but even smaller communities, like I was just 2 days ago in Baker City that has probably one of the most like number of historic buildings in that community. And that's really shaping the story that they're telling to visitors about how valuable their community is, all the way down to Southern Oregon and what's happening, not only Ashland and of course the Shakespeare Festival. There are thousands of arts and cultural nonprofits and artists that are doing the work in their communities and telling their stories. And so the Arts Commission and Cultural Trust, we have state funding to redistribute out to communities. So we have various grant programs that artists and organizations can apply to for their work of their organization or projects that they're doing in their communities. And we also run the Percent for Art programs, publicly funded buildings. If they're doing any construction or renovation, 1% of that project goes to art. And so our team manages that program. And then I get to travel around getting to know communities, and I lead community workshops on how to build robust arts and culture communities and how can arts and culture address your community needs or help you grow. So a community might want to bring in more people to move to that area. They might want to bring more people to visit. And so I help them identify, what are you currently doing and how do you build on your strengths to really be known as an arts and culture destination, and also how does it build community cohesion. I mean, we really learned during the pandemic how important arts and culture is because we lost it. Like we didn't have events to go to, and I think we all felt really isolated. And so it's so important to have events to bring us together in community and to share and to get to know each other. And I'm really working with communities to build the community you want to see.
We've talked a lot about the work you're doing with the cultural districts. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that seems like the natural extension of some of this, or the identifying that you, in fact, have a cultural district. I mean, you can have all of these things and they're kind of out there, but yet, how do you pull them together to really make that story and tell that story about your community or something? And we've had a couple conversations around cultural districts and the work you're doing there. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah. About 20 states in the country have a program called cultural districts. And in the Arts Commission and Cultural Trust here in Oregon, we're building that program. And so what I've been doing is traveling around to communities in many rural communities and really identifying, is this something that they'd like to build? And a lot of communities are saying, yes, we want to build an arts and cultural district. A lot of communities already have a historic district. A lot of communities are part of Main Street. And these are really robust programs that offer funding and other resources to help build the district. Well, why not layer arts and culture into that work? So, for example, I've been working with Toledo, a small rural community outside of Newport, that the mayor actually has been such a proponent of arts and culture that he created an advisory group that are putting art in empty storefronts, that are leverage funding for murals, that are doing events. They're really trying to build their community's identity through arts and culture. Same with Astoria, same with Toledo. I've been working with Baker City recently and Pendleton, and a lot of rural communities are really seeing the benefit of arts and culture and how the economic benefit in their communities and also that the community benefit. And so, there's a lot of districts that already inherently exist. I mean, they are already happening. They're naturally occurring areas where arts and culture are happening, whether there are actually physical buildings for arts and culture, whether it's performing spaces, visual arts centers, but also events that happen First Friday. Often it's centered around Main Street communities. It doesn't have to, but it's really naturally occurring areas where arts and culture is just happening. So why don't we just define it? Why don't we get people together to work on this together, as a shared community to have a common vision? Some communities are creating geographic boundaries of this is what our cultural district entails, and they're building out projects and really ultimately promoting their community's identity through arts and culture, which ultimately is telling the story of their community. That's what I love Oregon. Even a community half hour away or an hour away, they have completely different stories that they're telling. They have different artists, they have different histories, they have so many, like, it's very unique, the identity of each community in Oregon. And that's why I love traveling around to just empower them. I'm like, what are your strengths? What is your identity? And how do you want to keep growing?
Well, and I love how this intersects. One, you talked about why not, rally around it. I mean, I'm a big firm believer of being intentional. Okay. And a lot of this happens organically and it's there, but this being intentional about it to draw attention to it, it gives you more tools to leverage and I don't want to always look at everything through an economic lens, but marketing your community and not only that, lifting people up in the community that might be out on the sides of it and not see what's happening, particularly around the arts and cultures. And a lot of our artisans, our makers, our creators are, somewhat isolated. They're doing things in the basement, the spare bedroom. They're doing it on the kitchen table after the kids go to bed. Okay, that's their manufacturing facility. And shipping and logistics, it's the garage or whatever. And so I love that part of it. And Toledo is a great example because we've done a couple through our Foundry Collective with our Reinventing Rural initiative and with support of the city of Toledo and the Toledo Rotary, and as also help with Economic Development Alliance of Lincoln County, of course, and with Business Oregon funding, co-starters programs there. And our co-starters program is this 10-week program to help people go from idea to launch a business and for non-traded sector businesses. And a lot of our participants are artisans, makers, creators. They have hobbies. They're making knives. They're silversmiths. They're potters. They're watercolor artists, or they're trying to figure out, is there a business there, and is it a side gig business? So we've had real good successes in Toledo. Now we have this, they've had this effort to build this arts and cultural juggernaut there. They want to become a place that people stop and pull off on the way to Newport. Okay, so how better to do that than to say, hey, we have something unique, and come learn our story and come see our artisans, and then have successful small businesses there. So people are picking up things and leaving money in the community. And I love that. I mean, and I see that throughout rural Oregon. You've done a lot of work and helped with, Tenanawit, Warm Springs artist community. And we work very closely with Tenanawit and have continued to help support them literally from a mailing list up to a pretty robust retail shop now. And, we're beginning to roll out some additional artist educational programs there to continue to do that same thing, get people to stop in Warm Springs on their drive over from wherever it is, Portland to Bend or however they're coming through there, and understand the community, understand the culture, understand the history, appreciate the art, and have an economic impact as well.
Absolutely, because people travel for arts and culture. And we actually have statistics on that on each community where it's, 60, 70% of people specifically travel to that community for arts and culture. And also people will stop on their way places, like you're saying, because of arts and culture. It is an economic driver because it really helps define and tell the story of the community. And visitors want to learn that when they're traveling, they want to learn something new. They don't want to go to the same, you know, mini marts that they might have back home, right? Like we want to have a new experience and we want to learn when we're traveling. And the best way to learn about a community is through arts and culture and through the stories that we're telling through arts and culture. And so it is an economic driver. Actually, we participate with Americans for the Arts, which is a national organization to assess the economic impact of arts and culture on communities. And so we participate in this study every 5 years. And in 2022, we worked with 19 Oregon communities, most of them rural. And we now have data on our website, on the Arts Commission's website, of the economic impact of arts and culture. And even like small rural communities were completely surprised. So, for example, in or Ontario, Vale, Nissa area, $7 million impact of the nonprofit. We're just assessing the nonprofit economic impact of arts and culture in their communities. We have Pendleton, $14 million, and so these numbers really help remind decision makers, city and county officials, like arts and culture isn't just a nicety, but a necessity, and actually brings dollars into the community.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And it's interesting. We just did. I was just drove back from Burns yesterday morning, so I was there for our Biz Harney Small Business Wednesday night meeting, and we had Eastern Oregon Visitors Association there, and they were talking about all of the things they're supporting, and they had Farm Trail, and I was standing there watching this and thinking about our interview, and I'm like, whoa, Arts Trail, okay. If you could put together a brochure to drive around in a region and see all of the different farms and the agro-tourism, can you not do that same thing with arts and culture?
They are. And I know the Northeast region is doing an arts trail in a lot of communities in the Gorge. A lot of communities are starting to map out their arts assets so that visitors have access to it. Because when you think about it, when even a visitor or a local person goes to an arts and culture event, they are not only spending money on that ticket, if there is a ticket fee, but they're spending so much money on other areas. And,
Lodging,
right?
restaurants, gas, everything.
Right, you're
Absolutely.
gonna eat, you're gonna drink. I remember when I ran First Friday Art Walk in Eugene, and I was, at a bar restaurant afterwards, after the art walk, and I heard a woman on the phone talking to a friend, like, "Oh, I'm at the art walk." I'm like, "No, you're at a bar." But she was at the art walk. She
Yeah.
probably was at the art walk earlier that day, and she may or may not have purchased something, but then she came to the restaurant and had a drink. And then, you might buy a certain outfit for an event, and you might have childcare. And a visitors, actually, statistically, what we got in our data, that visitors spend 2 times as much as locals because of travel and hotels, et cetera. And on the coast, it's actually 3 times more. So arts and culture mean business.
From the rural perspective, and you and I have connected in multiple rural communities, and been fortunate to have you do workshops for us. But I want to talk real quickly. What unique challenges do you see in rural, and what are some ways? I mean, I want to bring challenges to the forefront here so we can talk with people about how we can overcome these challenges. What challenges do you see that are specific in this cultural development and this arts awareness in our rural communities, that not so much in our urban communities?
Yeah. I mean, rural community, well, number one, oftentimes, as you are aware, people view rural communities as a monolith, like one thing, all the same. And that's obviously not the case. And I've even traveled from, Joseph to La Grande, and they're 1 hour away, how different they are. Communities half-hour away, how different they are. And they have different opportunities and challenges. So I think we really need to shift the narrative that rural communities is all the same. And that they're all have the same challenges, because they do have some shared challenges. And I know a lot of rural communities deal with isolation. They don't have access to as many arts and cultural spaces, although there are some incredible arts and cultural centers in many rural communities. So it really depends. I mean, some rural communities have symphonies and operas and ballets. A lot of Carnegie Library buildings have actually turned into art centers, like in the Dalles and Pendleton and Baker City. So there actually are quite a few arts assets throughout our state, but oftentimes they don't have as much access, of course, as you would in a rural community. And also, you don't have access to decision making and being involved in what's happening. I think as a funder for the state of Oregon, one of the challenges we see is that, are we accessible to rural communities? Do they know us? Do they have awareness of our programs? Our big power shift between, a local community and the state, and we're really trying to help just visit communities and really build relationships and encourage them to access our grant programs, because there's a power differential that we're really trying to close that gap. But I think that also in rural communities, and what I just heard in Baker City this week was that, everyone's doing everything. So that, those arts and culture leaders are involved in multiple things. They're often sometimes involved in city council, and they're volunteering for this coalition and that event, so they're kind of really tapped out because they're doing so much. Like, people that want to do things, they just do more because they're passionate. We talked about that, like people that are just passionate at so many things. So that can be a challenge, because a lot of the work that's happening in rural communities is often like volunteer led. We need to help create more funding sources, so rural communities have access to more funding to build more paid staff. So a lot of rural communities are doing everything as volunteers because they see a need and they just do it. But I think what the biggest shift that we can do is really getting to know rural communities, each of them on their own, for their own unique challenges and their own unique opportunities, because they have different challenges and they have different stories to tell. So I really am, as I travel around the state, really listening to those nuances and what are their opportunities. I mean, I was so inspired when I, I'm talking about Baker City a lot because I was just there 2 days ago, but they talked about really they're taking on an abundance mindset, like more is more, so that if any new business wants to come in, they're like welcoming with open arms. They don't have this like competition mindset, because they really are trying to build their community, and they're willing to take risks, try new things. And of course, in real communities, you tend to know each other. Like, when I led my workshop, I was like, there's like over 20 people. It's like, okay, does everyone know each other? Do we need to do introductions? They all knew each other. They're like, yeah, we're all, we're all here and we're all there together, and they all know each other and they have these relationships. And so relationships are really important. And so really building on that abundance mindset and strong community cohesion to create this common vision, I think is really important, and is almost more accessible. I almost see that as an opportunity. It's almost more accessible to do work in rural communities, because you have just dedicated people that are doing the work and they know each other. They're already working together. So I really sometimes feel like, like a lot of the work that I've been doing with rural communities has progressed faster.
And it's interesting. There are, all rural communities, they're all different, but they're all the same in many ways. They face same challenges and they face the bigger challenges, but they all have unique challenges within their communities. And then we have levels of rural. Okay. So, you talk about a La Grande or a Baker City or an Astoria or the Dalles. They're rural technically, but they have a lot of resources available. Now we get down and we start talking about a Hefner, or we talk about a Spray or a Condon, or even a Burns Hines region. And we start to look at those where populations are even much smaller than what they are in some of those larger communities. But, what's exciting is you can see things like, the Spray General Store and what Joni Cabana has done there, and really uplift, using that place to uplift a lot of different things, including around arts and culture. It's a tiny town.
It's amazing. She's amazing. And, turning that into a music center and bringing musicians in and creating events is huge for a community and building that community cohesion. Same with Condon, which I love Condon, and the purchase of the Liberty Theater and the work that the Arts Council is doing there to really bring live events and expanding their center to do more arts programming. They've also recently changed code for the city to allow their city to do more murals. And so it's like they're, again, like the small group of people can really make a huge impact in these smaller communities. And Hefner, which I'm excited to go to
Yeah, you're
next.
going there, what, June 1st or something like that, right?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
going June 1st and 2nd. I'm actually doing 2 workshops there, and I'm excited to visit their art center, but similar, like a really small community, but doing incredible work because of the passion of the people that are there.
There's a favorite place of ours. I was just there. We just did some youth entrepreneurship with the Co-Starters Generator program, both with some high schoolers who were also there to decorate the Willow Street Innovation Center for the prom. And then the next day in the arts, that arts area that they had, we had probably 15 or 16 fifth and sixth graders, and we did a little bit of youth entrepreneurship. And then we decided we would do a goat walking business or a goat rental business, so you can rent a goat. And so then we broke out the colored pencils and the paper, and everybody did a rent a goat poster.
That's awesome.
So we had a lot of fun. But it's a small town again. You start to look at those communities in isolation, and I always look to Joseph because Joseph is about as far away as you can get. Okay, and you have to want to go there, and they've been able to, and they're smaller, but they've been able to put a flag in the ground and really build that up and make Joseph a destination location for that. And they're not on 84. Okay. They're not LeGrand or Baker City. They don't have a ton, they're not on a 4-lane road. It's a long haul to get up to Joseph, as you know. Um, and you start to look and say, for our smaller communities, can we do this? What's holding us back? What can we do? We can be 150 population. We can be 500. We can be 2,000. We're not on a main road. You have to turn right to get to Hepner and drive for 45 minutes off of 84. What can you do in those communities? And how do you create the attraction? I also love the abundance mindset. We constantly are talking about if there is competition, it's not competition, it's co-opetition, which is one. And two, we are not going to survive by chopping up the pizza into smaller pieces. We have got to make the pizza bigger.
Yes.
Okay. And we have to continue to work on that mentality of that more is better, and having 2 and 3 people doing 3 or 4 or 5 silversmiths in a community is a good thing because you become known for that skill and that trait, and everyone's different in what they're producing, and it builds multiples, and it helps create people begin to know about your community for your ceramics or your jewelry or whatever that may be.
Exactly. That's exactly what, when I visit communities, I'm not presenting at them. I am asking them questions. And in creating this dialogue, like, what is working? What are the strengths that you want to build upon? How do you envision your community in 10 or 20 years? What is your vision? Like, what do you want to see? What is the story that you want to tell about your community? And it is, based on the uniqueness of that community and the artists that live there and the histories and the stories that want to be told from the past, but the stories you want to create in the future. And how do you want to be known as a community? And I think that's the work that is really inspiring to me around my work at the state, is really getting people together to have these types of conversations, because we often tend to work in our own silo and we do our own thing. But like, okay, as a community, we actually can define our own future, and let's get together and talk about what we envision that to be and how do we want to be known based on what our current strengths are, based on our assets, based on our people, based on the art that we do. And it's all, and that's like why someone would want to travel out of their way, like you said, to Joseph or any community, because they travel statistically, specifically for that art and culture event. It draws tourism in, and it also draws people to want to live in that community. And I love, there's so many stories in rural where people grow up in a rural community, they leave, they go to a larger urban center, and then they come back. And they love the ability to come back to contribute to their community, to help it grow. And because they just have this sense of pride and they want to give back and they want to raise their kids there. And so, like, how do we capture those skills and that energy and those ideas? And like, if we can all kind of work together to intentionally build our community through that abundance mindset. through what's working. Where's their energy and possibility? Because honestly, there's times when I'm in my workshop and I hear communities talk about what's wrong and what's not working. And those are important, but you can almost feel like the energy being sucked out of the room and people get resigned. Like, that's never going to happen. We're never going to be able to do that. And that mindset really will stop you from making any progress. So I do try to encourage this abundance mindset of thinking about what's possible, because when you have energy and your community has energy, you're more likely to take on your collective goals.
Yeah. It's interesting how much the work you do aligns with kind of the work that we do, in that, our Reinventing Rural initiative, when I go talk to communities, or when we're in community, we're not talking about entrepreneurship. We're talking about innovation, and for a lot of years, rural has not been considered innovative, because all of a sudden innovative was, all of this fancy tech stuff and putting, satellites up, and so you can have, internet service and these types of things. And yet almost all innovation, occurred through our rural communities with extractive industries, but it was all linear innovation. So we talk a lot about that, and we draw this innovation as simply solving a problem with a new solution. Entrepreneurship, of course, is figuring out how to make money doing it, but and it's these communities that do have these challenges. Okay, we recognize them. How do we solve them? How do we move forward? What are solutions we could do to move forward? And then, we always talk about communities that have a higher proportion of people in the creative industries. What does that mean? Well, it means that usually you have a higher average income. You usually have lower levels of poverty, mental health issues, some of those things. You have usually a higher graduation rate through your high school. You have a lot of positives when you have a creative community. And if you can get into that creative mindset where you are solving your problems, and figuring out that we are creative, then you can lift up your creatives. And now that fills into having more arts, more culture as well. And it makes your community much more attractive for people to move back home, who might have moved away and love certain parts of a small town, but are missing other parts of that aspect, and building that out. So let's completely flip to the other side of Liora. Well, there's lots of sides of Liora, but let's flip to the other side of Liora here. And let's talk a little bit about your personal business, Liora Sponko.
Yes, I am an empowerment coach. I've been doing this for over a decade now because I love personal development work. I'm obsessed with helping myself grow as a person, to show up with more joy, peace, and ease in my life. And so I love working with clients. I work with them one on one. I've done group coaching programs, and I also do workshops, especially with your partnership. I've loved so much of traveling around the state to help people get their past out of their future, to get their stuff out of their way, because we often self sabotage. Like you said, if we have imposter syndrome, my art isn't good enough. I'm not good enough. Am I really a good enough artist? Am I a good enough business person? The lack of confidence, the self-doubt, we all carry this. No one's immune. We all carry these like wounded parts of ourselves from the past. And so I work with clients to uncover that, to release that, so that they can show up as their fully aligned selves. Like, that gives us energy to take on our goals. So we often want to blame, like, I can't reach my goal because I don't have enough time. I always hear that one. I don't have enough money. I have kids. All of these reasons and external circumstances why we can't have the life that we want. And really, it's like I talked about, the energy sucks out of the room. We pull energy out of our own selves by those disempowering thoughts. If we can clear those thoughts, then we have more energy to take on our goals and to live with more joy, peace, and ease in our lives.
And it's so funny because I'm beginning to find myself, when people say things to me, I stop and I'm now like, what would Liora say? Because I had an artist, a creative, who is selling knitted products, right? Fiber artist doing knitted products. And I'm in a small town, and she said to me, people are telling me I'm charging too much. And of course, my response normally would be, who? And just look at them and tell them, you're not my customer, okay, because you're wearing an acrylic stocking cap. But then I'm like, well, what would Liora say? So I actually said, how does that make you feel?
Nice.
Big steps for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's beautiful. I should create like a coaching program,
I need like five prompts
Yeah.
from Liora.
Yeah, it's all about like self-worth, right? It's like what's your view of yourself? Like what part of you has you, charge at that price, and what do you actually want to charge? Because it's all goes back to self-worth and how we view ourselves. So I love like that you're diving into the inner work. It's always whenever I want to personally blame or complain about something that's not working and I point my finger outward, I've learned to pause and then look within. That's one of my biggest tools. Just pause and look within. Okay, this isn't working. I seriously want to blame money, time, or a person or circumstance. What if I were to pause and actually, what am I dealing with? What are my fears? Where's self doubt showing up? What am I afraid of? Just pausing to ask those internal questions can open up so much.
So let me ask one final question here. For the rural communities that are interested in this, how do they, one, get a hold of you? So that's the, email address and all of that good stuff, which we will post in the show notes. But even more importantly, what should they be looking at and what should they be thinking about so that they can leverage, some of the resources that you can help bring to the table?
I love that. So it's all about transformation. So if a community wants to explore how do we grow, how do we transform, how do we tell our story, how can arts and culture support our work, then they can contact me through the Arts Commission Cultural Trust. And if individual really wants to work on their own individual needs and their individual blocks, and they want to build their business or create a stronger creative practice, or they want to build an organization and collaborate more, they can contact me to do one-on-one coaching, or also they can bring me to community to do a workshop. So is it the individual personal transformational work that you want to do, or is it the community building transformational work? And so I'm available, through the Arts Commission Cultural Trust for the community work, and then through my own coaching business for the personal work.
Obviously, communities can reach out to us at Foundry Collective and through the Reinventing World, and we can help connect you with Liora, as well as help look for funding to make more of these events happen.
And I'm so grateful for your partnership, Brad, that we've been able to serve so many rural communities together.
Well, it's fun. I mean, it's our co-starters, this co-starters program. And then what's really exciting is what's happening with Kiva, Oregon. So, we are the only rural Kiva hub in the United States. And we just surpassed, through just the hub, $213,000 worth of zero interest, zero fee funds. And a lot of those are going towards people in creative industries or in unique businesses. For whether it's startup, about a third of the people that are raising money is to start their business, and about 2/3 are help to grow their business. And they're, these loans are $5,000, $10,000, up to $15,000, zero interest, zero fee. So we're also beginning to say that, for like an artisan maker creator who wants to start selling, right now they typically sell hand to mouth. They make a bunch of stuff, they sell it, they use that to buy more inventory, right? And they're really constrained on trying to scale their business. So that ability to maybe, get a $5,000 and build up your inventory so you have a lot more to sell through the summer season when you're at these events and you're at these, First Fridays or whatever they may be, is huge for them. So, we're excited. And again, the support that you've provided for the communities that we work in has been amazing. And as always, we love you. So we're very happy to have you here.
Thank you. So
Thanks
grateful
so
for
much.
you.
All right.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks for listening to The Rural Blueprint. If today's conversation resonated with you, visit us at reinventingrural.com to access resources for rural entrepreneurs, funding opportunities, and business development programs. I'm Brad with Reinventing Rural, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Rural Blueprint.